This week's episode of the 262 Fishing Friday Forum is actually falling on a Thursday. Reason being, tomorrow is Friday, September 11th, 2020. Now, September 11th is not a day that we should be just sitting around watching YouTube videos. It's a day that we should be remembering our history and honoring the fallen. Whether it's civilians that died in the towers or on Flight 93 in a field in Pennsylvania, whether it's the police officers and firefighters that were running into the buildings while everyone was running out, or our members of our military that are fighting to preserve our freedom, whether before or after September 11th, Friday, September 11th, 2020 is a day that we should be looking back and remembering and honoring those who died for us. This week's episode of the 262 Fishing Friday Forum is talking about how to fish in the transition from summer to fall. Here in southeastern Wisconsin, that's in full swing, and our temperatures during the day, our highs have been in the mid to upper 50s and low 60s, so that transition is in full swing. But if you're further south, where the temperatures are still kind of warm, we might still be at the very beginning of that transition. Now, before I tell you guys how to fish that transition, I'm going to remind you to subscribe to 262 Fishing right now. We're at about 230 subscribers. We're almost to 250 subscribers, where I'll be doing the giveaway for this bass or lure kit by MEPS. So make sure you're subscribed. If you're not already, push the red button down below, subscribe. Let's get to that 250 subscriber mark so we can do the giveaway. I can stop talking about it and we can all move on with our lives. All right, so how do we know when the fall transition is here? Well, for one, you can look at the forecast. We've had some beautiful weather in Waukesha County, but today it's in the mid-50s. Tomorrow, all week, it's supposed to be mid-50s, low 60s, and that's after we've had temperatures in the 70s and 80s. So it would just make sense that we're getting into that fall transition just based on the weather. But you can't always base it on that, because you need to base it more on water temperature. Now, it's easy enough to say, well, just launch your boat, load up your graph, and see what the temperatures are doing. And if they're falling, you're in that transition period. But not everybody has the time or the technology to just launch a boat and just see what the temperature is. So here's kind of the guideline that I use. Even if it's still hot, it's still sunny, it's still beautiful days to go out for a swim or a bonfire or whatever during the day, if you're waking up and you need to put a hoodie on to go get your newspaper, that fall transition has pretty much started. So this video is specific to bass, but it can relate to other fish as well. But let's talk about bass behavior when that transition starts, when you start need to wearing a hoodie in the morning. Well, during the summer, there's basically been two places that the bass have been. You've had the bass that have been shallow, they've been under docks and under that cover, and you've got the bass that have been deep. They've been relating to humps and points and deeper spots underwater. Well, the shallow fish, they're just going to stay shallow, so that's kind of the easy pickings. The deeper fish, though, they're going to start actually moving shallower, and here's why. There's something called a thermocline, and what that is it's the spot in the depth of the water where the oxygen is the most dissolved and the most concentrated in the water. We've talked about this in the past, how bass need two things. They need food and they need oxygen, and they're going to go where both of those are. Well, in the heat of the summer, the surface water is a lot hotter than the water down below because you have the sun heating it up. So that thermocline, where the oxygen is more dissolved in the water, it moves lower and lower and lower in the water column because warmer air holds less oxygen. But when the water starts cooling off again, when we hit that transition, the thermocline is going to start moving up higher and higher because the surface of the water is going to start being cooler and cooler. So when that thermocline moves up, the bass are going to move up with that thermocline. So the deeper fish naturally will start moving shallower. But where do they go? They don't just go, okay, so they're on a hump here and they don't just go shallower, right? Where do they go? Well, they go to weed lines, but not just any weed lines. They go to specific spots. They go to basically pockets in the weed lines, because let's say you've got a weed line here, right? And then there's a pocket in the weed line here, and the weed line continues here. They know that if they can corner bait fish in here, those bait fish are trapped and they can ambush those fish a lot easier. But they're also going to relate specifically to living grass. As the weather cools down, so does the water temperature, and some of the grass is going to start dying off. Look for the pockets of grass where the grass is still green and still alive, because live grass puts oxygen into the water, and the bass are going to relate closer to that. They're going to avoid the dead grass, and they're going to abandon the dead grass almost as soon as it starts happening. As soon as the water cools off, the grass starts dying, the bass say, we're out, we're going to where there's oxygen. So they're going to be going to the live grass and the pockets in the weed line. So really focus on those outside weed edges, and especially if you can find live grass and a pocket that's a good ambush point, that's an awesome place to start. The other place you want to look is shadows. Now, during the nighttime, the fish are all scattered around because it's dark everywhere and it's cooler and the fish are comfortable. But during the daytime, especially some of these shorter days, you get longer shadows. You're going to want to really focus on those shadows, because in the fall transition, fish really school up and group together much tighter than they do in the summer. So you'll want to, especially like, let's say here's the sun and here's a tree, right? As the sun gets lower and lower, those shadows get longer and longer. But as the sun comes up in the middle of the day, the shadows get tighter, the fish stay grouped together. You're going to be finding bigger schools of fish. They're going to be grouped together, trying to stay in those shadows. So let's talk about the lures that we should be throwing during this time of year. And I'll start with one of my favorites. And in watching other YouTubers, it looks like this is one of their favorites for this time of year as well. But it's the spinnerbait. Now, I kind of like smaller spinner baits for this time of year for searching, because I can find the smaller fish. And if I find the smaller fish, like I just said, the fish are going to be schooled up together. And then I know, all right, here's a school most likely. I can slow down, upsize, and really start finessing that area with my Texas rigs, flipping jigs, those sorts of things. But for searching, I really like to start with the spinnerbait. Very closely related to the spinnerbait is the bladed jig, or what often people refer to as a chatterbait. Again, an awesome search bait. Again, I like to be kind of sized down here. Probably about a 1/4 ounce or so is about as heavy as I'll go. And I'll use this and the spinnerbait to fish above weed lines, around weed lines, to really try and hunt down where those schools of fish are going to be. And the spinnerbait and the chatterbait are two of my favorite ways to do it. The next popular lure to throw is one that's new to me, and I'm still very new to learning, but a lot of other people like it, so I'll include it on here, and that's the swim jig. The swim jig is a great lure to be able to swim around and through heavy weeds. We already talked about how these fish are going to be looking for the live weeds and abandoning the dead ones. Well, oftentimes those live weeds will be inside clusters of dead weeds, and you got to get to them somehow. A swim jig can cut right through all those weeds, get to the live grass, and get to your fish. And last but certainly not least, and actually near the top of my list, are what I'm referring to as lipped bait. That's your crankbaits, your jerkbaits, your square bills. That's something that's going to have this nice little, you can reel it in consistent, you can give it an erratic motion, you can bounce it off of hard cover, because fish this time of year are also relating to hard cover. A lot of fun to fish this lure. And if the fish are just swiping and not eating, you got these wonderful treble hooks that get effectively caught in your hand, but also can catch fish that are just swiping, and you still might be able to hook one. So those are some great baits to actually search and try and find where these schools of fish are going to be. Once you've found them, you want to slow down. This is where you want to throw your drop shots, your Texas rigs, your flippin' jigs. In some cases, you still might be able to throw a frog, because let's face it, who doesn't love throwing a frog? But once you've found the fish, really focus on those areas and pick them apart, because the fish will be schooling, and there should be some big ones in there mixed in with the dinks. So those are my suggestions for how to fish the summer to fall transition. Comment down below if you have additional ways that you think are a great way to fish this time of year. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to 262 Fishing to see more 262 Fishing Friday forums, my journey to catch a fish in every lake here in Waukesha County, and of course to get to 250 subscribers so you can win the lure giveaway. If you're local to Waukesha County, let me know what lake you'd like me to fish on my journey to catch a fish in every lake in Waukesha County, and that's where I'll head to. And of course, I'm always open to other suggestions for topics you'd like to see right here on the 262 Fishing Friday Forum. And as always, folks, remember, it doesn't matter if you go around the world or go around the corner, just as long as you go fishing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the water.